Hello, hello, hello everyone. This is Adil from Pakistan. I welcome you all in today's webinar. Hope you are doing well. So now, uh, first I would like to give a little intro of this platform, and then we will start the webinar. Okay, so this is the online platform known as the World Literature Webinars, where we invite most experienced speakers from different corner of the world, and they come and provide their knowledge on their topics. And then now I would like to talk about the webinar. So I will tell you that how we are going to conduct. So the speaker will start her presentation, and the topic of the presentation is power, identity and style, a disclosure and literary analysis. And then a question and answer session will be held where you can ask the questions from the speaker regarding the topic. And in the last, I will send you a feedback form link in comment box. You will have to complete it out in order to get certificate. If you do not complete it, then you will not be able to get the certificate. So watch till the end to earn it. And now I will give the intro of today's speaker, and she is Lynn Basa. She from Philippines. She is graduate of PhD linguistics major in applied linguistics from Philippine Normal University. She is a professor and the head of the English department at Rizal Technological University. She has published numerous research papers in the reputable journals which focuses mostly in linguistics, literature and education. At present, she teaches both in the undergraduate and graduate schools programs where she handles several specialization, education and research courses. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the speaker, Ma'am Lynn.
Oh,
Hello, ma'am.
hello, good evening. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. So it's 7 p.m. now in the Philippines. Good morning, good afternoon, and good day to all who are in the other parts of the world. Okay, do you see my presentation now? Okay, is my presentation visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so thank you very much. I would like to start by asking if you have encountered the novelette, The Pearl. Okay. Perhaps you may answer in the chat box. Okay. I'm happy to see a number of my students. So, our students in Rizal Technological University are watching now. Shout out to you. Okay. So, are you familiar with the novelette, The Pearl by Steinbach? So it was written by James Steinbach, an American writer and the 1962 Nobel Prize in Literature winner, according to sources, for his realistic and imaginative writings, combining as they do sympathetic humor and keen social perceptions. Thus, he has been called a giant of American letters. Let me share the plot of the story to those who have not encountered it yet and for those who read it some time ago. So let me refresh it for you. So in a place setting called La Paz, so there live a small family of Kino and the wife Juana with their son Coyotito. That one morning, While they were taking their breakfast, Juana saw a scorpion biting her son while lying in a hanging box. Of course, we know the sequence of the story. The son was poisoned. It was a scorpion. Juana told the husband to call the doctor. But the husband, Kino, knew that the doctor was dead. So, again, you know what happened in the story. They did what they have to do and went back to their usual. Let's just assume that it's as if nothing happened. So they did first aid and then went back to their usual lives. That same day, as Kino dived for pearls, he found the pearl of the world, and that started to change their life. Through the pearl, Kino started dreaming. But as we all know, in every plot, there will always be the so-called villains. So the trackers started hunting them to get the pearl. The plan to escape and build a better life outside La Paz did not happen for that particular night. While they were hiding in that particular cave, the trackers, hearing that the baby's cry is that of a coyote, they shoot it. Well, you can already guess the ending of the story. Kino and Juana, carrying the dead body of the son, the next morning went back to La Paz. And they threw the pearl back into the ocean. If this is in my class, I would ask my students, are you going to do the same? Are you going to throw the pearl back into the ocean? In my number of years observing pre-service and even in-service teachers, even I, this way of delivering literature naturally follows the question and answer portion as a form of discussion. Questions such as, what is the title of the story? Where and when did the story happen? Why did they behave that way? Or how did they overcome the challenges? Plus, of course, at the end of every literature class, the 1 million question, what is the moral of the story, are basic or typical in literature classes. Trying to dig deep into a certain literary material. Some may activate different literary approaches such as psychological, sociological, historical, Marxism, cultural, and others by asking questions such as what human nature is revealed among the characters? How were the characters presented? What kind of society is portrayed in the literary material? What was happening during that time that prompted the author to write such kind of literary piece? And to make teaching whole, we try to look into the linguistic aspect of the literary piece to discuss target grammatical aspects, making it a literature based approach in teaching. Why? Why do we do that? Well, because we adhere to the idea that literature mirrors life. That's a classical answer. If I may just share with you, in our university, every time students, in fact, I did a study on their perceptions about literature. Students were asked to define literature. You would read different several papers but of the same answer. And what is that? That literature mirrors life, which is good because they see the value of literature. So what is literature used for? Google would provide us with an answer that literature is a method of recording, preserving, transmitting knowledge, and entertainment, which have social, psychological, spiritual, or political role, by which it allows a person to see himself or herself in the story and could be a source of exposure and understanding of culture. And of course, with an ultimate goal. And what is that? For appreciation. That literature would be for appreciation, that we would be able to appreciate literature. But apart from those, literature also exposes power. Now, what do we mean by power? And how is power manifested in literature? Power is the ability to control others, events, or resources. Thus, power is a thing that is held, coveted, seized, taken, lost, or stolen, and it is used in what are essentially adversarial relationship involving conflict between those with and those without. Power is found and could be found in language. These core structures create power relations in terms of how speakers negotiate relative status through interaction. In the context of written materials, in the text, like the example I have given you, it can be played out in the conversation and often working out or exposed with the help of ideology. This means that there is a strong connection between literature, language, and its style in disclosing literature, power, and eventually meaning. Using the same literary material and to strengthen the link between literature and language, I attempted to identify and explore the different elements and linguistic instruments used by the author in the same material in projecting power, which eventually leads to the construction of identity. In the material, the pearl, in my analysis, attempted to look into the important distinctions between the usual elements of analysis and speech presentation styles, which allows a clear measure of what the story is about, as well as deviation from or adherence to presentational norms and description of reader positioning. So you allow me, if I may share with you some of my findings. The analysis of the literary element does not end with descriptions. The place setting, these are the excerpts, was vividly described: a small town, brush houses, an everyday simple life, including the hanging box, barefooted wife are indications of a lowly class life and powerlessness society, as compared to the city of stone, which projected elevated socio-economic status and dominion over the townspeople. Furthermore, the disparity in social class was elaborated by the newcomers, particularly the beggars from the front church who were great experts in financial analysis, meaning all those who are passing by, they could critique, they could make comments. Steinbach presented a clear divide between the educated high class and the poor class through their properties and state of living. One can easily distinguishes the demarcation line between the two through the lines in the materials. I presented them in this slide. Thus, the townspeople everyday simple life is also revealed in the excerpts. The novelette was written in a parable form. It started with a short preface in which Steinbach introduces the story of a great pearl, along with the three main characters, namely Kino the fisherman, his wife Juana, and the son Coyotito. Steinbach did not present elaborated adjectives. You could not find that in the novelette, which could describe Kino's physical qualities. But the lines could prove that Kino is strong and courageous through his statement, I will go. No, I will fight this thing. I will win. One could sense hopefulness, positivity, and determination. While Juana was described as a submissive wife. However, it could also be gleaned that she is adaptive to situations and could easily adjust to any changing environment for the betterment of all. Hence, her power to adhere and to acclimatize is evident. Juana is described to be physically strong, but more than her physical appearance and her physical strength, her motherly nature triggered her power to overcome the circumstance and the determination to ease the pain of the son. The other character, Juan Tomas, was the elder brother, and Kino looked to him for wisdom. However, if you would read the novelette, you would notice that Juan Tomas is a typical conformist to the norms of the old ways of their ancestors, for he too was afraid of the future. His wisdom was limited to their own experiences. Juan Tomas, therefore, was identified as complacent, someone who is contented with the life given to him. So his social self identity was a result of his social experience, his frequent use of the pronoun we. So you would see in the novelette the number of we that Juan Tomas used is actually a projection of self as object, imagining self from the perspective of someone else. The doctor was described as the fat, lazy doctor who believed that he is better than anybody else and would exhibit his power by refusing to cure the ill without money. While for Kino, the doctor was someone belonging to the upper class but is exposing evilness. He was identified as an unusual, greedy, and corrupt. His fronted identity as a doctor was superseded by his weakness. The contrasting self presentation of the doctor inside and outside his home reveals his loss of authentic self. So his shortcomings were overpowered by his corruption by behaving ironically. Similarly, the servant, which played very little role in the novelette, yet you would notice that the servant, the man who looked out at Kino, was one of his race and tried to distance himself from Kino through his language. That was the scene when Kino went to the doctor and the servant was the one who opened the door. The servant's utterance projects an exclusion from his race for self elevation, illuminating superiority over others of his own class. When Kino spoke to him, to the servant, in the old language, the servant actually strongly resists the idea of kinship. The pearl contains many rich symbolisms, which are used to convey the message of the parable being told. The Indian village is compared to the habitat of a colonial animal. For Kino and Kino's kind, a canoe is life. It is where life is dependent. That's their livelihood. It is a symbol of inheritance, a very important property. It is also both an instrument and a source of power, for without it, Kino would not be able to find the pearl. The pearl, on the other hand, signifies freedom. Freedom from oppression, of poverty, and meager existence. A pearl is a symbol of wealth and better future, of the American dream of quick fortune and prosperity. However, Steinbach also presented the pearl as a sign of evil, of destruction, corruption, greed, and death at the end. To characters who desired to have it, you would also notice along your readings the presence of the word song, the phrase song. The song did not only intensify the character's emotions but indirectly revealed the character's inner selves. It carries strong power and underscores the story's theme. At the beginning, the song implies the way of life, a life that is customary. The song of the family, song of the pearl, song of the undersea, song of evil appeared many times in the story. Throughout the story, various songs portrayed the inner feelings and thoughts of the characters. So, in the beginning of the story, the couple hears the song of the family, which means that they are contented and hopeful. When the pearl is already at hand, they heard the song of evil. Thus, the song projects the background or the tone of the events. The scorpion and its poison was introduced immediately at the beginning. A scorpion is notable for its powerful poison. It symbolizes a great power. In its short citation in the story, it stood as an external force that drove the characters to their inner selves. The venomous creature represents the evil forces that will soon enter their lives. Its sting was quick, yet its effect lasted up to the end of the story. The rifle is not only a powerful instrument of destruction. It actually symbolizes power and security, a social status. It was the rifle that broke down the barriers. Kino's striving and eventually his epiphany, his awakening from his dream, the gunshot brought him to his senses, which eventually brought him back to La Paz. The son Coyotito was the only son Kino and Juan have, the only treasure of the couple. Coyotito is a struggling society that represents the collateral damage. So in the story, the baby served as the sacrificial lamb, a powerless creature which provided the couple the power to dream and to survive. So to show you the summary, so this is the representation of the different symbolisms. Do you agree that the sweetest word one could hear is your name? May I check in the chat box? Do you agree that the sweetest word one could hear is your name? That's true, right? Names are often regarded as one-time labels fixed to solid objects, useful for identifying them but without any real substance or inherent interest. However, naming emphasizes an active set of practices rather than a static system. A person's name is currently a primary identifier. When somebody calls me, no matter how far am I, or if I would just hear the name Lynn, definitely that would call my attention. Identity and name are closely aligned concepts. A person's identity is generally considered to be established at birth. Names are rarely unique. Individuals are usually able to exercise wide description to choose to use different names to support different aspects of their identity. In the institution, we're fond of giving or name calling, even giving codes. Like for example, majority of our students in the department would call me the queen bee for reasons I do not know, but that's an identity. Individuals are usually able to exercise wide discretion to choose to use different names to support different aspects of their identity. In addition to being a primary means for an individual to be identified by others, a name also constitutes an important component of a person's identity. Moreover, names can indicate gender, marital status, birthplace, nationality, ethnicity, religion, and position within a family or even in a society. In the novelette, the name Coyotito, that's Kino's son, means little coyote. The ito ending gives a noun the meaning of small or tiny, which reveals powerlessness and inferiority. While the names Kino, Juana, Juan Tomas adhere to a localized inhabitants of a defined community. Although in the Mexican regions, the names are typical, naming provides the person certain identity. Steinbach takes the characters, gives him a name, the Kino name, is actually based upon a 17th century missionary who was considered a great man, as the priest points out, and Steinbach endows him with all the primitive but human characteristics befitting the hero of a parable. Juana, the wife, is the prototype of a primitive native wife, strong, loyal, obedient, yet independent and courageous. When the occasion demands such qualities, she possesses all of the values which allows this type of person to endure in spite of all the obstacles. The doctor and the priests, on the other hand, provide a more generic professional distinctions. Their labeling assigns specific characteristics which oftentimes stereotype their identity. Both characters are so unsympathetically portrayed that they function only on a symbolic level. The doctor is a representative of another way of life, a way of life connected with the pearl buyers and with foreign elements. He has actually no redeeming qualities, and his actions show him to be the most despicable, heartless individual that one could encounter. It could also be noticed that the Indian village, as its name suggests, La Paz. So, what's the meaning of La Paz? Peace. Peace is equivalent to contentment. Restricts to the expectation of what its inhabitants should embody. So its naming suggests conformity to what kind of place and people it has, which serve as an unnamed controlling power. It could be gleaned that one of the most obvious means of establishing identity is through the giving of the names. Naming sets an individual or thing or place apart from the others and sometimes carry important meanings for individual identity. Thus, names are representations which are frequently imposed on some groups by others who may be in more powerful position for social categories. Therefore, we could say that Steinbach's naming did not emerge out of nothing. So, even the naming of the place setting, of the characters, actually exhibits certain kind of identity and power. Utterances. This time, the power of linguistic devices, because I also tried to look into the language aspect of the material, specifically the use of the models. Yeah, the power of the models. Utterances constitute certain acts, and it could be detected that the novelette is dominated with modal verbs. I was able to account a lot of modals all throughout the very thin novelette, which carries various acts. So the use of different models conveys various speech acts, which explicitly expose power and weakness. Thus, through the language used, one could surmise the character's undisclosed identity. The use of model would imply acceptance of reality or even of defeat. So you would notice that the modal will is used to state and dominantly projects determination, finality, and necessity. Modal must is used to command and also projects determination and obligation, while the modal shall implies not only determination but also acceptance of defeat. I also noticed the use of deictics. Okay. The use of the deictics can help to substantiate and perhaps enhance the impressionistic awareness of literary effects, which position the readers in the imagined reality of the fictional world. By considering the person, the place, and the time deictics, we know that the novelette is told by a third person narrator pointing to the characters as he, his, him, she, her, and they. In the introduction and in the final passage, the omniscient narrator speaks of events that happened long time ago and have become important through repetitions. For most of the novelette, the narrator can easily abandon the past using words such as awake, shown, had been crawling, looked, and others, and go to the present. The use of is, says, see, and then to the future. Will be, will have, will go, so he can move back and forth while describing things which are quite impossible to observe. While the use of the first person point of view, the use of I, proves that the main character, Kino, takes full responsibility of his action, which projects empowerment and active participation in the events. So, if these are some of the excerpts, his use of I will fight these things, I will win over it, I am a man. The main character takes full responsibility of his action. The first person narrator necessarily assumes a participant role in that case. Text present the speech and thoughts of characters, and this can be very manipulative of their ideologies as well as those of the reader. Their viewpoint are discussed in text, but whose words and thoughts are mediated by a narrating voice. The utterances of the characters are single string sentences. It's quite a surprise and it's amusing. While I was actually reading the novelette, I I got interested because all throughout sentences are simple sentences. The shortness of the dialogues project power, determination, and finality. Although one would expect that the characters would use simple sentences to designate their social status. Of course, the simple sentences indicate capability and power to us because they are uneducated. They are not capable of elaborate sentences. Their language actually indirectly exposes a strong sense of determination which reveals superiority. The ideological messages revealed that the character's identity and social stratification. Through the use of language, the author, Steinbach, was able to project the character's attitudes and beliefs. Moreover, the use of direct speech was employed to highlight and background speech according to the role and attitude of the characters and to channel the reader's view of the characters. Direct speeches represented confrontational scenes, which created impressions that the characters are in control of the event. The characters' choice of language are consciously and unconsciously principled and systematic, are social acts and ideologically driven. Another power of language, and this time the gendered language, you would notice that through Juana's language, an empowered woman was revealed. Juana's language project determination and control over her husband, the doctor. Go get the doctor. Then we will go to him. Open it. No. Juana's language projects determination and control. The use of simple sentences also indicated that Juana, as a woman, could actually equal the speech style of men, short yet clear, enlisting her as domineering and strong willed as men. Moreover, it could be detected from her language that Juana would talk less as compared to other women wives. Her direct statements express illocutionary acts, which projects courage, while these lines infer that Juana projects sensitivity and wisdom. Therefore, we could notice that the language use depends on the relevant properties and communicative situations as interpreted by the language user. The way Juana talked is a contradiction of the way usually, female speakers are generally perceived. So, what's now the conclusion? Steinbach's Pearl is a short read, yet emotionally captivating and compelling. The blending of a simple, short span of words and cultural social criticism shows the beauty and the depth of the story. It reveals the reality of a character's turning into a tragic hero, from hero to a tragic hero, that his determination to change his condition results to his ultimate moral downfall. The characters are depicted not as full three-dimensional characters, but as figures possessing certain traits that are representative of a large number of people in which greed echoes as destructive force. The roles of faith and agency in shaping human life, colonial societies' oppression of native cultures may be extracted, and the conflict between the simple and the naive pearl fishers and the pearl buyers who use their position to exploit the powerlessness natives who represent a certain force in society which oppresses the Indian divers, and yet they are also victimized by forces above them, the hierarchy. The doctor and the priest who have shown no particular concern for the dreadful flight of the natives until there is the rumor about the pearl of the world. The author uses several symbolisms. The scorpion's poison is biologically compared to the pearl's effect. So the pearl itself is compared to success, to evil and destruction, to man's vanity and wishes, to Kino's soul, his son, to a sacrificial lamb. Hence, the pearl, the scorpion, Kino's canoe, Coyotito's name, and the discussion of the pearl that might be Juana's prayer, Juana and Juan Tomas warning to Kino, and even the rifle were used as symbols. The story contains little dialogues. The characters speak infrequently, but their thoughts and their feelings are made clear through the powerful description of the author. Statements are written in simple sentences, but the author excelled in selecting the exact words and correct turn of phrases. Let me repeat that. Statements are written in simple sentences, but the author excelled in selecting the exact words and correct turn of phrases. The lack of dialogue and simplicity of the statements only emphasizes the quiet intensity and simple manner of the characters, which projected power. Even the nonverbal quality helps to reinforce their discomfort in the presence of the sophisticated doctor, the priest, and the pearl buyers who are expert in using their language. And all of those contributed in the construction of identity. And so let's move on now to the most exciting part, the question, because normally this would be my last piece to my students. So what now? So what then? At the end of this, what do we get? At the back of our mind, the question of, so what is the relevance? This kind of analysis, the one I demonstrated with you, tried to demonstrate the usefulness of stylistics in equipping students with critical and linguistic skills when decoding a certain literary material. The Pearl as a sample text, which is composed of colonialist discourses, could teach critical skills among students and may encourage them to go beneath the surface impressions in order to discover the meanings which are located at the deeper level and make literature study most relevant. Analyzing the language of text can equip students with a language based critical pedagogy, as this would provide them a way into the text and appropriate meta language to enable them to talk about the language of a text. In order to understand how the structures are used to view power and identity presentation. So at the end, I would say, but this is of course not mine, literature is the art of discovering something extraordinary, about ordinary people like Kino, Juana, Juan Tomas, even the son Coyotito, and saying with ordinary words something extraordinary. Because in the end, in language, there is power, and power is language. And so, with that, I would like to end my presentation. So, thank you for listening, and more power to us. These are the references I've used in my presentation this evening. So, if ever you have feedback, you have comments, questions, um, I'm very much willing to answer if I could answer the questions. So that's it. Thank you very much. Okay, so I got a message to ask questions from you if you have, because the host is still reconnecting. Let me check the chat box. Okay, let me see. So the question is from the one I saw, the first one I saw. This is from Prince Pontanares. Good evening, ma'am. As a teacher, how can we encourage 21st century learners to learn more about literature? Um, well, I think what I just did is one way of encouraging our students to um, yeah, to learn more about literature, because as I've mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, literature is not only about a question of the basic elements like who are the characters, where is the setting, but there are a lot of things which we could get out of a certain literary material. Studying the language of the literary piece would actually bring us into another perspective. In this context, the presentation, in the sample I've shown you, the context of power. In the surface level of the story, we know that the characters are belonging into the lower class, but analyzing their language would lead us into the perspective that there is something more with them, and they are not only described with the way they dress, with the way they behave, but even the language they utter in the text itself, their presentation in the text. So understanding the language of the text is another way of encouraging the 21st century learners to learn more about literature. After all, as I've mentioned a while ago, how do we define literature? It mirrors life, so that eventually at the end we would be able to appreciate it. Okay, so let me see if there are still other questions available. Uh,
Ma'am, you can see question here now. Actually, sorry, it's raining here, so I got disconnected.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So the question is, what framework do we use for analyzing stylistics? I've actually utilized critical discourse analysis in the analysis of this paper. Discourse analysis is a good framework in answering this. But because I tried to look into power as inclusion of the analysis of the language, so I utilized critical discourse analysis. Okay. I'm not so sure if this is a question or this is an observation. Good understanding of literature by the teacher is a solid platform where students can explore everything on their mind. um, that is true because as I would always tell my students, I'm not so sure if this is a question or this is a comment, but I do agree with that because in teaching, the principle is that you cannot teach what you never learned and you cannot share what you did not experience. So how could you make your students love literature if you yourselves do not love literature? How can you make them explore it if you have limited space to literature? Okay, another question. How can we reconcile the integration of social media in learning literature in spite of the economic status of the Filipino? I'm not so sure what you mean with your question. How can we reconcile the integration of social media in learning literature in spite of the economic status of the Filipino? um, your big words here, your variables are social media, integration of social media, learning literature, and the economic status. I would I will answer this the way I understood your question, but I'm really not so sure. But I think social media is a very good material in teaching, especially even in literature, because this would provide us authentic materials. And in the 21st century teaching, we usually start with the authentic material and then bringing back our students to the original one, because we have to bring them first to what is close to them so that they would be able to bridge what is present and what is the original text. I hope I was able to answer that question. I wasn't able to capture what you mean by that. Israel Malano. Okay, so any other questions? How can we make literature more engaging to college students? Um, Mr. Menes, it's you. Okay, so uh, you are a literature teacher. Okay, wait. So how do we make literature more engaging? A number of strategies, apart from the question and answer, which we do in the class, would do. And our students now, since they are very active, activities, you start with the activities first, despite their level, because the nature of the collegiate levels we have now, especially in our setting, is a bit similar to those in the basic education. So I think um, activities would make students engage more in literature. And as I have mentioned, because this is an issue on how do we make our students love the classic. So you present them first the new versions and then bring them back to the original. You do not just provide them the available one, the new versions, because there are different versions. But what is important is that they would be able to see themselves first with what is available and then bringing them back to the original so that they could reconcile both. Okay, so thank you for the question, Mr. Menes. How can we make literature or a story to reality? Are there pointers or factors that we should consider, since learners would seem not interested when they can't connect to the subject. Now, this is actually the irony. Um, if I may just get back with my presentation a while ago, the mere definition of literature should interest learners. And I think it's not that they are not interested, because I could still remember when I was still handling the basic education, junior high school. Some of them might not be listening to the teacher, but they are busy reading sequels of Harry Potter, the new the books coming out now. It's not that they are not interested, but I think it has something to do with our strategy in teaching, because I have a lot of students who would really this isn't basic education, who would save money to buy books, to read very thick novels, even the Wattpads. No matter how we perceive Wattpad, that's that is still literature, and they are interested with that. And there are so many novelty books coming out now, which only proves that students are reading. The young ones are reading. I think it's a matter of how we bring these literary materials to them. And that's the question. What kind of strategies should we bring into our class to make our students engage in our literature classes? Because literature is truly interesting, an interesting subject matter to deal with. It's about life, right? It's a reflection of life. It's about them. And it would be very easy for them to connect with the stories in literature. So I think it's the strategies we use. Hmm. The kind of strategy we used in the class. That's my answer.
Uh, Guys, I'm going to send you again the link of the feedback form. So please fill this form.
Okay. So are there
And
still
thank you.
questions?
Let me check, ma'am.
Jethro, you are here. In terms of literary analysis, is stylistic solely subjective in its approach to literature given to its primacy? No, not only to literature, of course, to any text available. And it's a very good approach in looking at different texts.
Guys, in previous link there was no uh, box for email. So please again fill out your feedback form by this link that I have sent now.
Are there still questions?
Yes, ma'am. Let me, ma'am.
What did you find most useful activity to set as springboard in discussing literature to senior high school? Um, this is more on the motivation. So, what did you find most useful activities? I think that depends on what kind of students you have, the nature of your students. That's another thing you need to consider. Plus, of course, the concept of the sheltered instruction, because when you talk about literature, it's subject to many interpretations, not only of the teacher, even of the students, but generally what we do in the class is that we try to lead our students to the same direction. So in doing that, we have to think of an activity which is both connected to the literary material and to the kind of students you have. Like for example, there was one time I was teaching in the not in the senior high school, in the junior high school, grade 7. So I thought songs to them would still be interesting. But I was surprised that they were not anymore. So the following day, I changed them into interactive storytelling about love, and they were so interested, and I was actually asking myself, so is this really the nature of the students now? So I think that kind of activity, as early as your the motivation part, is very very important also to consider. The concept is there is no one size fits all strategy or activity to be used in the class. It depends on who your students are, the nature of your students, plus of course what you want to achieve with them during your lesson. Okay? So any other questions?
No, ma'am. Now we are going to end this
So if there
session.
are no more questions, thank you
Thank you,
very much.
thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your presentation. And guys, please fill out this form. Otherwise, you will not be able to get the certificate. So, the previous link I have sent you, fill your form through this link that I'm sending now, again and again. So, ma'am, should we leave? Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank you
much.
very much. Thank you very much.